welcome to the iVent Administrator Panel. I'm Lana Clements, News Editor at Mortgage Solutions. I'm delighted to be joined today by Katie Hoyle, Senior Case Manager at 177 Mortgages, Shelley Knight, Finance and Operations Assistant at Brightstar Financial, and Abbey Proud, Case Manager at Coreco. So we're going to kick off today by perhaps talking a little bit about the last 6 months. Obviously, COVID, the lockdown, coronavirus has had a huge impact on the entire world, not to mention the industry. But I wanted to talk a bit more specifically about the impact it's had on administrators in your role. So perhaps, Katie, if you could just perhaps talk a little bit about how the last 6 months has impacted you in your job, and yeah, what's been happening.
Well, for our company personally, at least, we did have to place a few staff on furlough leave at the start of COVID, which obviously is going to have a knock-on effect as to how work can progress. So we did a bit of a change of process, really. So a lot of our advisors and our sort of sales force, they took on some administrative duties, and we cleared sort of our pipeline and had a look at the process and how we can streamline it down, because we did have lesser staff in. Our team has now reduced to myself as well, so we are sort of continuing that process change at the minute, because unfortunately with all of with the elevated lender timescales, which I know you girls will have experienced as well, everything seems to need to change towards a more efficient process rather than just doing what things were before. And I think that's probably going to come into effect quite soon.
Okay, so yeah, as you referenced there, there's been the timescales are a lot longer. Are you noticing that, Abbey, and how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, so a lot of lenders are taking a couple of weeks just to look at documents now, and they're asking for a lot more documentation as well, just to cover themselves, to make sure the client is affordable and can maintain the mortgage. So a lot of the time we're going back to the client asking for more documents than we would pre-COVID. So a lot of it's kind of managing the client's expectations a lot more than we used to, by saying, oh, we have an update in a couple of days, but now it's a couple of weeks and there's a potential they can ask for more documents. So it's kind of, we've changed how we speak to the client and provide the updates as well, because we have to keep monitoring the lender in the background as well now, compared to before. We knew, oh, it's going to be a couple of days. It is a couple of days, but now it's 2 weeks. Are we still okay for next week? Because sometimes timescales change, even though they've said it's going to be 7 days, it can actually be 12 days.
Yeah, and so Shelley, I expect you're seeing sort of similar kind of issues. Just how are you kind of dealing with those and keeping everyone up to date, really?
Yes, so I've only recently joined the finance team. So before that, I was case manager for our short-term lending team. So again, we experienced increased timescales from like 24 hours up to 72 plus. Yeah, communication at the moment is key, just keeping everyone up to date. If you tell a client or a broker that a timescale is like 3 working days, they're much more understanding and they won't call you in between, which allows you to get more work done. Yeah, it's just all about managing your workload and managing your clients and brokers.
Yeah, and then I just kind of wanted to touch off on this point with Katie, but do you think this is going to kind of change the way you work for good now and change the role of the job, really?
I think, I hope that there's going to be a lot more positive sort of outcomes, really, from what's happened. I think companies as a whole have started sort of looking a little bit deeper into their admin processes, because they're realising how much of the workforce and how much time they actually spend on them. So I think it's going to be moving towards, as I say, hopefully a bit more efficiency in that sense. But I did want to just quickly touch on what Shelley had said with managing clients' expectations, and Abbey as well. I don't know if you have found at all, but especially during COVID, there's been a lot of clients and customers who I think that we've had to change our approach in how we explain the sort of managing the expectations to, just for the fact that and as you can completely understand and appreciate, it's a stressful time for people, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're always on their best reactions to things. So I think there's been a lot of change in the way of explaining the processes and why there's been extended timescales in order to actually sort of actively give them a full picture. I guess you girls will sort of have the same, really.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you're sort of having to think on your feet a bit more and taking how you're talking to different kind of people.
I think it's just extending as a case manager and doing sort of our kind of roles anyway, you always have to be adaptable to different clients. And I think it's just an extension of that skill now, but it's just sort of developing it a bit further.
Yeah, okay. So just going a bit more generally, talking about the job and what it involves, I thought we'd just touch on perhaps like your favourite parts of the job, like what do you love about working in the mortgage industry, and more specifically about working as an administrator. So Abbey, let's go to you first for that one.
I think the best part is making that call when the client completes and find out that they're in the house. Sometimes you get a picture of them outside. It's just like you've been part of that journey with them, and for them to finally be in there after X amount of weeks, months, it's so proud to know that you've actually been involved in that. And then the recommendation you get on the back of that, you know, you've kind of served them quite well. So I think that's probably the best part, as well as calling them with the offers as well, because you can actually hear them like in their voice that they're so happy and pleased.
Yeah. What about you, Shelley?
Yeah, I agree. I used to love when you used to get a case that almost seemed impossible, when they used to come to you and they have like 2 weeks to complete. And when you actually get to make that happen for a client, yeah, it's fantastic. And then receiving, when you got the positive feedback about the service you gave them, either by email, over the phone, or by a Trustpilot review, it's really rewarding. From the role I'm in at the moment, I get to then take the next step and carry on the service with brokers, because now I'm involved obviously in their payments and everything. So I really get to see the whole process now.
Yeah, it's good. And Katie, anything else to add to that? Do you?
To be honest, I think I'm quite similar to both of you. What's always been my goal within sort of my role is the clients. And it is lovely seeing that journey with them. And also if there are difficult cases, and I deal with the protection side of things, so we deal with a lot of medical details as well. And a lot of times when you are trying to look for insurance policy terms for people, if they do have existing problems or conditions, it can be quite a sensitive conversation. But again, once you're able to actually sort of complete that task and that process for them, give them the news, you can get them cover, or likewise their mortgage is due for completion, it's an incredible feeling. It's so rewarding. And I think that's the best part of the job, at least.
Yeah, sounds good. So perhaps like then looking at the flip side of that, what would you say are the most challenging aspects of the job? Let's start with you on that one, Shelley.
So it's like the complete opposite, is the giving the bad news. Always challenging. And I always used to try and overcome it by putting everything down in an email, explaining everything so I didn't miss any points. But then following up with a phone call, having that personal touch, but then knowing that obviously because you're having just a conversation with someone, that sometimes things can be missed, but you've got your email that you've sent them so they can have a read through and then give you a call after if they need to. But yeah, giving bad news when you've done everything you can, yeah, it's really horrible.
And how about you, Katie? Have you got any sort of special methods with dealing with the challenges that you come across?
I think, yeah, similarly, I think the best and the worst part to our jobs can be sort of giving the news to the clients, basically. At the end of the day, you get the extremities of them both. I think, especially over COVID, as I said, there's been a lot of changes, I believe, in sort of responses from clients when there's been delays on cases. So as Abby mentioned earlier, some lender timescales have gone from a standard 4 days to 12 working days plus, and you're still getting to the point where you're calling them on the 12th working day and they're going, unfortunately we've gone up by another 2 days, and you've then got to go back to the client and go, I know I did say to you it's going to be 12 working days, however they've now told me something different. So I think there's a certain way to go about it, and it all depends completely personally on your client. You can usually, when you're in a process like this with them for quite a while anyway, I think you can read people quite well and how they like to respond to questions, whether they're more email based, whether they like wording, or whether they like things quite simply. And I think it's always dependent on who that is. If you've got someone who's coming back and isn't particularly happy with the information you've given them, it's not to try and win them around and get them back on board. It's to explain to them why that information is in place. The more you do that, the more they appreciate where it's coming from, and then they make their own sort of changes of opinion themselves. But if you try and force sort of an update, or I say new news on a client that they're not particularly happy with, you've got to do it in a very much roundabout way, I think, to let them appreciate that there are certain factors involved, but also that you are trying your best as a company and as a sector at the moment.
Yeah, and do you find that as well, Abby, as well as, I suppose, as well as looking after clients' needs, you've got colleagues and lenders to deal with as well? Do you find it's kind of coming from all angles?
Yeah, it's like trying to prioritise what's important to everyone as clients, lenders and brokers. Trying to manage what to do first is quite hard as well sometimes. For example, this week I had a client that the lender didn't release the funds in time, and another client that valuation hadn't been instructed, the vendor was going to pull out, and it's kind of juggling, right? Yeah. They're both really important. Obviously the client's stressed on both sides. Where do you go first? And it's kind of, you've got to explain to both clients, yep, I'm going to do this today. And it's kind of managing their expectations and letting them know you are doing everything you can. And I think in that scenario, obviously completion is more important, because if the funds aren't released, the whole chain is going to collapse. And then again, the valuation, get that instructed, but it's still going to take that extra couple of days for the surveyor to get in contact. So for me, the completion one was more important, but it's kind of prioritising your own work as well, knowing that what's going to come in and how you're going to solve it as well.
With you, Shelley, do you have any kind of organisation hacks that you sort of use within your day-to-day job to kind of keep on top of who you should be contacting and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I'm known for having an extremely organised Outlook. I have folders for everything, but this is what really helps me. And when it's really busy and you can just see your emails building up and building up, I will put every email relating to a certain case in that folder for them, and then I can read everything that's happening in order, whether because the consultant that might be working on the case as well, you don't know that they might have just sent the lender a quick email. So instead of you wasting your time repeating what they've already done, you can see everything that's happened, and then either go to the lender with a thorough update, or the client, you can see what you need to do. So that's how I manage my workload. Everyone works different. But yeah, that's how I handle it. Yeah.
I mean, I think that sounds like an amazing method, and organised emails are definitely a good way forward, I think. And how about you, Katie? Have you got anything that you kind of put in place to deal with lenders and keeping on top of those?
Yeah, I sort of organise in a slightly different way, just because of obviously the differences in job, of course. I usually set my day out where I'll have certain calls to do at parts of the day. So I'll have a first hour of the morning where I will sit for completion exchange chasers, make sure that those are done. And usually in the morning, people have got they've started calling solicitors, or they've got information from previously. So you're getting the most sort of relevant and up-to-date point at the start, well, in the morning, I would say. As the day sort of progresses, I group my lender calls. So within my diary management, I usually state it as a lender name, the task that needs to be done, and then any additional information. So as soon as it comes up in my tray, I can see that I've got 12 Barclays calls to do, I've got 7 Halifax, and I know exactly on each case what it is I need to ask. So as soon as I've started the call, regardless of the longer hold times at the minute, if we're waiting 45 minutes on hold, I can still then get the 7 cases done within the 10 minutes after they answer. So you're not wasting too much time. You're making sure you've got all the information in front of you available in one call, rather than constantly outbounding. And obviously that just, for us especially at the moment, because they are so increased on terms of when they actually answer the phone, we are waiting for hours a day on hold, listening to various lovely hold musics, and seeing what we can do in the interim to actually get other bits of work done. So that's another thing, is doing your emails whilst you're on hold. If you know you're going to be on hold to a lender for 45 minutes and you know they've got a long hold time, there is no point in sitting. You might as well get something done that you can do separately, and then that's done for when you get off of the phone. That's a separate task done.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so I'm getting from all of you that being organised is really key to this part of the job. Shelley, would you sort of say there's any other kind of skill sets that are quite essential really, or the kind of person that this role would suit?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be detail orientated. It's your job to pick up on things before forms and documents are sent on to the lender. If they're not checked properly, then you're just going to waste more time, because then the lender's going to come back with questions and then you're back in the queue. So yeah, it's trying to pick up on as much as you can when you get things in. And then just being, I think, just outgoing, having good communication. You want to build that relationship up with your lenders and your clients. Yeah, it's good to have it both ways, because if you need to call in a favour, you want to have a good relationship with that underwriter at the other end of the phone.
And do you agree, Abbey? Would you sort of say you're quite a people person?
Yeah, I think you've got to be, being an admin, you've got to be able to build that relationship up with the clients and the brokers to provide them the best service. I think if you're half-hearted, you're not going to give that client the best experience. And I think another important part of it is your time management. As what Katie said as well, you've got to be able to multitask and work under pressure and problem solve as well. Is probably one of the key bits as well, being an administrator. Always putting the client first, I think.
Yeah, and sort of how do you go about problem solving, not to just are there any kind of tips that you do, or just is it just sort of common sense really?
Yeah, so I think, say you're sending like a bank statement to the lender, just go over it briefly to see if there's any large transactions or anything that you can spot that the lender or the underwriter might pick up on, instead of waiting X amount of days for them to come back and ask it anyway. So I think looking for attention to details again.
Okay, so I think that this has all been really informative and really interesting for all the audience and everyone watching in. I just wanted to finish off by finally asking each of you what your sort of top tips would be for you know, people who want to get into this role, or just starting off in this role, or you know, even been in it a long time. Yeah, you're basically one sort of piece of advice that you would give. Let's start with Katie.
I would definitely say, following on from what you need to be in this role, or the skill sets that would be useful in this role, I think proactivity. If you're proactive in what you do, and it all depends on what you're looking for, but if you want to exceed in your role and exceed your knowledge, the best thing that you can do is set aside time to actually find out that knowledge. So I would say call a lender, spend 10 minutes on a call with a lender, finding out what their standard processing is. If they've got anything weird and wonderful about them, note it down in a book, move on. When you've got 10 minutes free, do the next lender. It's just enhancing your knowledge and making sure that you're not just reading what's in front of you, but willing to find out more. I think, at least.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds good. And Shelley, what would your top tip be?
Yes, if you're new to the role, just ask so many questions. Just try and learn as much as possible. If everyone makes mistakes, but own up to it, people will be there to help you out, and you will learn how to not make that mistake again. And the same with lenders. If you're not sure, ask them questions. They are there to help you. I found that when I started out, and it was so helpful. So ask everyone questions to learn as much.
Don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, definitely. And Abbey, what about you? What do you think?
As well as what Katie and Shelley said, I think being really organised and knowing exactly what you've got to do for the day really helps. So you don't miss anything and everything is like ticked off. So I think having a good diary or time management skills is really useful.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I think this has been really informative and everyone will enjoy watching. So thank you.
Thank you so much for taking part in this year's Mortgage Administrator event. I hope you found it interesting and that what you've learned will be useful to you in your role. If you're watching live, we'll be in touch shortly via email to ask for your feedback on the event. This is invaluable to us and will help us shape and develop the content for next year. Once we've received this feedback, we will send you a link so you can claim your CPD hours for attending. Now, don't forget, you can come back and watch any of this content on demand for the next 6 months. And if you think your colleagues could benefit from the event, they can still register online and have access to the event on demand as well. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this event. Thanks also to all the speakers who have taken part, and of course our sponsors, without whom this event really couldn't take place. We look forward to welcoming you to one of our events again in the future. But in the meantime, stay safe, keep well, and thank you again for joining us.